Welcome to the debate. When you move into an old house, there's usually this clear difference between the load-bearing walls that keep the roof over your head and the decorative clutter left behind by previous owners. You strip away the old wallpaper, you throw out the broken furniture, but you never take a sledgehammer to the foundation.
Right, because if you do that, the whole thing just collapses. You need that structural integrity to actually live in the house.
Exactly. But when we look at human consciousness, particularly through the lens of our topic today, which is Commentaries on Living, volume #1 by J. Krishnamurti, and researched by Sachin J. Karnik, that distinction between the necessary foundation and the psychological clutter becomes the center of a really profound controversy.
It gets very messy very quickly.
It really does. So, the central question we have to figure out is this. Is it truly possible for human beings to completely dismantle their psychological identification to end conflict? Or is the mind's reliance on memory and functional identity fundamentally and biologically intertwined with our psychological sense of self?
Which is the ultimate question when dealing with this material.
Right. So I'll state my position up front. True liberation and the end of human conflict require the absolute dissolution of psychological identification, leaving only a functional tool to navigate reality.
And my position is that because the brain inherently relies on memory and the naming process to function, completely severing psychological identification from functional identity is an idealized impossibility.
Well, let's start with Krishnamurti's core premise here, because he makes a very sharp, uncompromising distinction between functional identity and psychological identity. Think of functional identity like the GPS system in your car.
Okay, sure.
It's a purely transactional tool. It calculates routes, it accesses data, it just says turn left to go to the grocery store.
Right, it's practical. Completely objective.
Purely practical. But our psychological identity, the ego, is like a virus in that GPS system. Suddenly, the GPS isn't just giving directions, it's judging you for taking a wrong turn.
Yeah, it starts having opinions.
Exactly. It's insisting it's a better driver than everyone else on the road. It identifies as a Republican or a Democrat, American or a Frenchman. Krishnamurti observes that identifying oneself with these groups or ideologies is driven entirely by tradition and habit, and it actively puts an end to all creative understanding.
I definitely see where he's coming from there.
Right, because it's an illusion born out of a deep-seated fear of our own inward emptiness. And we have to shed it to truly live.
Well, look, I certainly acknowledge that clinging to dogmatic identities causes immense societal harm. I mean, Krishnamurti is dead on about the dangers of the unchecked ego. But here's where your GPS metaphor completely breaks down for me.
Oh, how so?
I just don't think the psychological self is a virus you can just, quarantine and delete. If we look at how the source material explains naming and memory, it points to the reality that the I thought isn't just an optional mask you can rip off. It is the operating system itself.
But if it's creating all this misery, why wouldn't it be a virus? It's clearly a malfunction.
Because the brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It cannot process new information without instantly searching its archives. Say your heart starts racing. The brain immediately searches its database, finds the label anxiety, and triggers a cascade of historical context to help you survive the moment.
But that's functional memory.
It categorizes fresh experiences using past knowledge. So the moment the mind labels an experience like, this is my anxiety, it instantly activates the accumulated past. Therefore, the I thought is an unavoidable byproduct of how human memory provides continuity. You can't just turn it off.
But that survival mechanism, that heavy reliance on the past, is exactly what mutates into ambition and conflict. Krishnamurti dissects this beautifully. We use our memories of what we lack to project a future where we are somehow more.
You mean the drive to achieve?
Right, personal ambition, like obsessively climbing the corporate ladder for wealth. But he also talks about impersonal ambition, identifying with a noble cause or a collective. He argues that both of these are structurally identical and equally destructive.
Wait, really? Even a noble cause?
Yes, because both live in psychological time. Both are escapes from the present what is. I see why you think ambition is necessary, but let me give you a different perspective. Action doesn't require an ideal to aim for. True action arises from direct perception, affection, and intelligence, not the need to become something else.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. If we remove the projections of a future ideal, we risk a state of stagnancy rather than this spontaneous being Krishnamurti describes.
I completely disagree that we'd be stagnant.
But human beings are fundamentally motivated by anticipating the future. That drive to become something is the mechanism that builds civilization, cures diseases, creates art. If you completely strip away the desire to achieve an ideal, what functionally motivates us to do anything beyond basic biological survival?
Well, direct perception, affection, intelligence. Krishnamurti isn't advocating for sitting in a cave and doing nothing. He's advocating for action that isn't born out of friction and deficiency. And the mechanism for this, which directly answers your point about the brain being a prediction machine, is choiceless awareness.
Observing without judgment, which honestly brings up a massive biological problem.
How's it a problem? Observing our thoughts and reactions exactly as they arise, without the desire to alter them, is incredibly practical. Let's look at his concept of dying every day. What does that actually look like in practice?
I assume it means not holding on to the past.
Exactly. It means when someone insults you, you experience the sharp sting of it, but you don't let it solidify into a long-term grudge. You don't let it become psychological memory.
So you're feeling the anger, but you're not saying, I am an angry person.
Yes. By observing a reaction exactly as it arises, without naming it, the artificial duality between the controller and the controlled completely collapses. The brain keeps its practical memories, how to speak English, how to do your job, but the psychological authority of those memories is cleansed.
See, it sounds beautiful in theory, but structurally, the observer and the observed are biologically intertwined because they rely on the brain's reliance on the past. True, non-judgmental observation contradicts the brain's fundamental purpose, which is to evaluate reality for survival.
But must we be forever bound by a primitive evolutionary programming?
I think we are entirely bound by it. You say we can observe a reaction without naming it, but the very act of conscious observation relies on the brain's categorization systems.
Not in the state of choiceless awareness.
But the moment you are aware of the anger from that insult, the brain has already referenced its database. The self isn't a ghost in the machine you can simply exercise through pure awareness. You're treating the mind as a purely mechanical processor, which really misses the depth of what he's saying. Krishnamurti is pointing to a dimension of consciousness that transcends that mechanism, and if we can access that, it has profound implications for how we live together. He asserts that the world is simply our relationship with others.
Right, the individual is the world idea.
Yes. Therefore, real revolution is not a mass political movement, but a radical inward reevaluation of relationship on a small scale. If we free ourselves from the known, we transform the world. That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that our personal consciousness is essentially made of the content of centuries of human conditioning? We share this vast psychological pool.
Which is precisely why we have to step out of it.
But can we actually step out of it? Attempting to step entirely outside of this collective stream via pure, isolated introspection really underestimates the gravitational pull of social structures.
It's difficult, sure.
It's more than difficult. Can a single individual truly achieve total psychological emptiness while living in a world that constantly demands and reinforces psychological identification? Trying to eradicate the me completely might just be another idealized ambition, which is the exact kind of trap Krishnamurti warns against.
Is a paradox. I'll grant you that. But to summarize my position, the psychological self, with its constant need for security, identification, and ambition, is the absolute root of human sorrow.
Right.
Through choiceless awareness, we can actually collapse this center, and in doing so, we interact with the world purely and affectionately, using the functional mind as a tool, not a prison.
And to summarize my position, while extreme ideological identification is undeniably dangerous, the architecture of the human mind, built on memory, naming, and continuous self-reference, makes the total eradication of the psychological self an elusive paradox.
We definitely converge on the reality that unexamined conditioning and the unchecked ego lead to immense conflict. I think we both clearly see the danger there.
We absolutely do. Where we continue to disagree is whether the human brain is genuinely capable of achieving a state of complete psychological emptiness while remaining functionally engaged in the world.
Precisely. And honestly, the profound depth of Krishnamurti's philosophy is that it forces us into this exact tension. This debate really invites everyone listening to directly examine their own mind and relationships rather than just accepting a theory.
Exactly. There is so much more to explore in this material.
So think back to that old house we talked about at the start. As you walk through the rooms of your own consciousness today, ask yourself, which walls are truly holding up the roof, and which are just illusions of security keeping you locked inside?